What's the fastest you've seen a couple go from married to divorced, and what caused it? My uncle. It took a year for them to get engaged and a year for them to divorce, if that. My uncle is a nice guy. His first marriage didn't end well. He wanted a family. Along comes this leech within the fire department half his age. They ended up falling for each other. They got engaged fast. Well, they were supposed to have the wedding really fast, like next year, but they ended up cutting that in half and getting married in court by themselves sooner. This girl was sketching the whole time. She had 2 past husbands and 3 children, and I guess she was getting alimony or something, even though she didn't have even practical custody over any of them. The one vacation we went on, she basically snatched her oldest son because her father demanded he stay and go to football camp, but she took him on the trip without having legal custody. On top of that, her other 2 kids were brats, and she was super entitled to anyone talking to them about their behavior. One punched my brother and he pushed him into a sand dune to not hurt him but retaliate, and she yelled at my brother for shoving her kid because he was defenseless. Meanwhile, I was severely mistreating my cousin, the uncle's son, by trying to control everything he did and not allow him to use electronics or to go out with us. That was the only vacation she went on with us. My uncle ended up paying all her bills, helping her pay for her kids, and giving her any support she needed, even though she was already well supported. After he had his name on all of her stuff, he found her phone, littered with messages and pictures of NW things. It turns out this girl was doing the entire fire department. No one in the department bothered to confront my uncle, even though this has been happening for like a month or 2 since the marriage. Even though they were married for less than a year, he still got stuck with her bills for a while, having to take her to court and fight everything. She got him for alimony too, I think. He may have had to stop paying her. Luckily, he found a nice older woman who's super sweet. She acts so much better and is more thoughtful, wanting to help and spend time with the family. She's already had her kids move out, but she's super nice and caring towards my little cousin, and she helps keep my uncle organized. They aren't even married and everyone already calls her aunt. A happy ending to a trashy story. Story 2. My boyfriend's cousin. She's 21 and dating a 19-year-old who looks 12 and is tiny. She's a very large woman. She's extremely physically cruel. I watched her pick this man up and lock him in the trunk of a car by sitting on top of it to win their argument at work. He proposes to her, and after a few months of dating, they get married. He annuls the marriage and leaves in secret the next day. Goes into hiding for 6 months. She posts lots of woe is me, sappy breakup stuff. Somehow out of nowhere, he's just back. They're remarried at the courthouse and now she's saying she's pregnant but not telling her family. Her husband looks miserable, and according to the grapevine, he doesn't work anymore and is confined to the apartment they share. Whether that's by choice or not is up for debate. The poor guy looks like a withered husk of himself. Anyway, we've reached out, confronted the wife and begged the husband to leave. I called the cops, given him shelter and resource information. He's over 18 years of age. Calling the cops does nothing because he lies to them. They can't arrest her just because they said there was a crime going on. He has to admit he's in danger and wants to press charges or get help leaving. He won't do that. Our hands are legally tied. Until he's ready to seek help, all of us are keeping an eye out. I know the cops aren't doing anything because he's a man. Cops do this to women too. If you're a woman and they call the cops, saying you're being taken advantage of and you'll tell them you're not, the cops will also do nothing because the victim of the crime is denying the crime occurred. Story 3. I was invited to a wedding by a friend who was a bridesmaid, Rebecca. It was a lesbian couple, Karen and Des, that I never met, but on first impressions at the altar, they seemed relatively happy. As the night went on and people started giving speeches, there were a lot of playful threats to Karen. People are saying things like, "Don't you hurt Des or I'll come after you." It was uncomfortable, but most people laughed, so I laughed too. The night continued with lots of drinking and dancing, and the couple left in a limo for their honeymoon. Before leaving, I overheard Des's parents saying they liked Karen but weren't sure marriage was for her and were hoping Des could change that. Surely, 2 weeks later, I'm talking with Rebecca and she fills me in that on the limo ride, Karen and Des got into an argument over the way Karen had been dancing with a flirty bridesmaid. The next morning, they left for their honeymoon in Hawaii, with Des still fuming over Karen's flirtatious behavior. Karen tells Des she's been paranoid. Karen takes Des for a day of fun, sightseeing, and a romantic dinner. Des starts to believe she was being silly. They're married now. This is a new start with clean palettes. When returning to the hotel, Karen jumps in the shower. Des sees Karen's phone light up with texts. Assuming it was more friends and family wishing to congratulate them, she peeks at the screen and sees the beginning of a text from the flirty bridesmaid. Des can't stop her curiosity and unlocks the phone to reveal the flirty bridesmaid just arrived in Hawaii. It was ultimately revealed that Karen had planned to sneak off to sleep with the flirty bridesmaid. Again, as she had done so right before the wedding multiple times. Now being confronted with Des knowing what was up, Karen packed her stuff and left Des to join the bridesmaid at her hotel. Des caught a flight out and filed for divorce. Several years later, she's happily married with a child and another on the way. As for Karen, who gives a crap? Story 4. When I was in the army, my ex-wife and I were good friends with a couple that lived a few doors down from us. One day I get home from work and he's sitting on his front doorstep. I say, "Hey," and he says, "Dude, you gotta come see this." So I walked into his house and it was empty. Completely. Not a scrap of paper, not a bag of trash. The weird thing was that every cabinet door was open. Every refrigerator door was open and every drawer was open. If it was supposed to be closed, it was open. He said the front door was wide open when he got home and every faucet was turned on too. No note, nothing. His wife was just gone with everything in the house. The thing was, my ex-wife and I had dinner with them at their house the night before, laughing it up, drinking, having a great time. No sign of a thing going wrong. He said the first thing he did was call her parents' house and her father answered the phone. Before he could even ask if he knew what was going on, the father said, "Bill, you need to let it go," and hung up. Remember that line from True Lies when Tom Arnold says his ex-wife even took the ice cube trays? Well, she took the ice cube trays. Also took all of his uniforms and other clothes. He literally had the clothes on his back and what was in his pockets in his name. I never did find out what the motivator was. She was just gone. Story 5. My best man at my wedding was driving to his honeymoon with his new bride when she told him, "I don't think I want kids." This was after being together for years and claiming that she did want kids. Then as they pulled into a gas station, she told him, "I don't think I want to be married." He almost left her at the gas station. After they got back from their honeymoon, she would stay out until 4, just about every night. No calls or texts. I just wasn't coming home until very late. They were divorced within 6 months of the wedding. My wedding was not too long after his divorce was finalized. I told him very clearly that he was allowed to give a rambling Mosby-esque speech about how love was ruined. He gave a very nice funny speech instead. Story 6. 8 months from wedding to separation, another 4 to the divorce being finalized. They had been engaged and living together for 5 years. They married in August. He bought a house in December, mostly because he was really pushing for it. I moved in and immediately started referring to the empty bedroom as the nursery. She wasn't ready for a kid, but she figured they'd get there eventually. And some pretty big differences in their expectations came to the surface. He expected her to become a stay-at-home mom soon, and she expected to continue building her career. He expected to have financial control over the household and even lied to her about their bills. She expected to be an active partner in their financial future. By March, she had cheated on him and then moved out of the house. The paperwork for their divorce was finalized before what could have been their first wedding anniversary. She and the guy she cheated with got together immediately. They eventually bought a house together. A few years after that, they got married. She's a great stepmother for his kids and has been able to build her career. She's even working in a master's now. She and her ex were both a-holes, but he was worse. They're both better off separated. Story 7. My second husband changed completely after we got married. He made lots of effort in the relationship before we were married, but as soon as he got me, things changed. "Why would I spend 10 pence to text you during the day when I'll see you at home tonight?" But the biggest was that we had agreed I would continue full-time when he would go part-time. He was also at part-time night school to fit in with childcare after the birth of our daughter. We had also agreed to look for a bigger house after the baby was born. About 3 months in, he got tired of the setup and wanted to go back to full-time work. He gave up night classes and left me literally holding the baby. I had no option but to give up my job and take something with more child-friendly hours, which meant we couldn't afford a bigger home as I earned more. Everything we agreed on together as a family when pregnant and planning the marriage, he went back on. He was the one who pushed for the baby. I agreed on the basis that he would be the primary caregiver. He changed his mind. He broke all his promises and set my career back 10 years while I brought up my daughter single-handed. I'm a nurse. I couldn't do it without childcare for my shift pattern, and he knew it. He used to not turn up to pick up the baby, and I would have to call in sick. Some men complain that their exes don't let them have the kids. I didn't need maintenance money. I needed my child looked after so I could work. I ended up with neither. I'm now remarried to a good man, a kid almost grown and nursing full-time again. Can't get enough of these whirlwind divorce stories? Give us a thumbs up and hit subscribe to never miss out on our latest videos. Story 8. I used to do a weekly movie or game night with 2 straight couples, plus me and my partner. Both couples had kids and seemed perfectly content with each other. One night while we were having dinner before the movie, the wife of the first couple got up to go to the restroom and left her phone unlocked on the table. At some point, the conversation topic turns to something cute their kids did that day. The husband picks up his wife's phone and opens the photo app to show us the video. The phone is full of dozens of intimate pictures of the husband of the second couple. Shocked and not knowing what to do, the first husband simply turns the phone around and shows the whole table just as his wife returns from the restroom. There is a very long silence as everyone stares and mentally puts it together. Then the other couple's wife quietly stands up and says they need to go, right now. No more words were said or exchanged beyond a few mumbles. My partner and I also left as quickly as possible. Both couples were separated within a few days and divorced shortly thereafter. The 2 star-crossed lovers briefly dated for real and then also blew up for unspecified reasons a few months later. Story 9. I was married at age 18 for exactly 10 days before going through a divorce. We had dated for 3 months prior to that. Basically, about 3 days before we were married, he decided it was a good time to steal his roommate's identity and credit cards. So all of a sudden, I have a really nice wedding ring, he's got a Camaro, we're looking at houses to buy, and he's decking me out in nice clothes. And then we go out partying every night and get a hotel to crash at. It's an 18-year-old sheltered girl's dream. Until things don't start adding up. Until he starts sending you the car while he pays for everything, until you start to hear someone call him by a different name in a bar, but it was loud, so maybe you misheard. Until he starts getting more sketched out every single night until you're bouncing between multiple hotels and bars every night. And then there's a run-in at a hotel with the owner screaming, freaking out, and threatening to call the cops. He says no big deal, the dude is just crazy. We'll go out partying and you do, and when you leave, the cops chase you for hours. And you keep asking for answers and you never get any. Finally, it's 4 a.m. and you're on the beach and so tired, and the cops surrounded the car and cuff you and ask what you know about your husband and his identity theft. Story 10. About 3 hours. Okay, that isn't technically true, but here it goes. 2 years after graduating high school, a friend of mine in the Marines is set to deploy overseas, and he decides to marry the girl he has been dating since her junior year of high school. He proposed on a Monday, and the next day they got married at a courthouse. He told everyone they were engaged and set the date for a month later. It wasn't a big wedding or an expensive one, so it wasn't hard to put together on short notice. I was invited along with a few other friends from school and a bunch of other Marines that never met. The wedding was nice and only about an hour long, then another hour and a half for pictures and food. It was a very pleasant, sweet little wedding. Shortly after the wedding, the couple checked into a motel for their honeymoon, and the new wife spilled the beans that she was pregnant and her husband might not be the dad. Apparently, she was eager to get married quickly because she thought it meant Brian wouldn't then leave her. When he found out, she was wrong. He immediately began paperwork for an annulment and thought it took forever to happen. Things worked out in his favor. Story 11. My grandma's cousin was married for 2 weeks. He's always been a bit eccentric. He went to high school with her, then left for a different part of the country. He then became a successful businessman and made quite a bit of money. I met up with her for the first time in 40-plus years, and she fell in love at first sight, or second sight, 2 weeks after he proposes. A few weeks later, they got married. 2 weeks later, she files for divorce and takes him to court in an effort to get half his money. She wasn't successful, but she didn't exactly fail. The rumor in the family is that she gets a few thousand a month. Hearing my grandma tell the story is heartbreaking. He's an odd guy, but he does a ton for the less fortunate. He's built schools and shelters in South America and does a ton for the communities down there. Now there's some hoe in Illinois taking money that used to help the less fortunate. Story 12. My cousin has been planning a wedding for a while now. She had her theme, her dress, and her cake all pictured out in her head. She really wanted a dark purple, almost black accent color with a white base for everything, except for the bridesmaids and things like that. Their base color would be black with dark purple. But her fiancé had shot her hopes down. He told her not to like 95% of the dresses she was considering, and he said he really didn't like the wedding she planned out. It really broke her heart, considering he told her he really didn't care what she would do as long as the theme wasn't bright, hot pink. But other than that, it was okay. It turns out it wasn't okay. To make a long story short, she was about to get married, then turned around and said, "If you're not willing to make this about us and not just you, then we won't be getting married at all." Which, I saw where she was coming from. But to this day, she regrets not getting married because if she wanted to now, she would have to ask her fiancé all over again. Story 13. I film weddings just to get some extra cash on the side and buy cool cameras. One couple I met got engaged, married, and divorced within the year of 2017. They got engaged in a skiing holiday in early February and planned the wedding for July, in the middle of the crazy wedding season. They got in touch with me 4 months before the wedding, so I charged them for a late booking fee. I like to get organized for each wedding several months prior to limit any problems that may arise. They got married, and 2 weeks later, when I had finished the extensive editing process in my spare time, the bride told me she didn't want the videos because they were getting a divorce. It turns out the bride walked in on the groom with a bridesmaid in their apartment 4 days after the wedding. So they were technically married for less than a week. That's gotta be a world record, right? I still got paid in full, and instead of letting the videos go to waste, I sent copies to the parents of the bride and groom in the hopes that they'd keep them safe for some time in the future. Story 14. I caused it, kind of. One of my closest friends had an open relationship, and after a few years, the two got married. Also open, the bride's secondary partner was the best man. After about 5 months, I hadn't seen my friend since the wedding. We decided to hang out at his place. His wife was staying with her secondary partner that night, and my friend lived far out of the city, so it was cool for me to stay over, as there would be no way for me to get back home once we started drinking. We ended up drinking, and, we did discuss beforehand whether it was kosher, and he said it was okay. Well, even though she had never said anything about not hooking up with me specifically, and she knew I was staying over that night, she decided retroactively that she didn't approve. Really, what happened is that she used it as an excuse to bring up every issue that they had, and they ended up separating. In the end, he was the one who wanted to get married, and she never really did, but did so to make him happy. A few months later, she sent her secondary, I imagine now primary, partner to serve my friend the divorce papers on his birthday. So, she was a delight. Story 15. About 4 months. My boyfriend's friend met this girl on Facebook last December, started dating her by Christmas, and secretly married her 3 months later. They did it in secret and refused to tell anyone. The guy knew that all of his friends hated her, so that's why he wouldn't tell anyone they got married. The girl told the guy that they couldn't tell their parents because of her daughter's father, who doesn't pay child support and isn't in the child's life, and the girl still lives with her parents. All their friends find out they're married because the guy leaves a wedding picture at work and the boss finds it and shows everyone. They still never tell their parents, though. This guy quits his job to work where she works for less pay than he was getting at his original job, and he moves to a tiny town 30 miles away from work because she's supposed to move in with him. She continues to live with her parents and makes excuses not to spend the night at his house. He tracks her location and finds that she's going to some other guy's house for hours at a time, but he stays with her and never questions her about it. She gets pregnant and he insists that the child is his. At about 5 months into the marriage, they start fighting a ton more than usual and she leaves him. She finally tells him the baby isn't his and he lies to all of his friends and says she miscarried so he doesn't have to admit that he married an insane woman. He told her parents they had gone married as a little revenge, but I still don't think he ever told his parents or told them she was pregnant. Hope you enjoyed hearing these lightning-fast turn of events, and if you're intrigued by the dynamics of doomed marriages, make sure to catch our other video, What Happened at a Wedding That Let You Know It Will End in Divorce. Story 2 won't leave you hanging. See you there.